Discover the latest health tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories. This is the Health Channel Podcast. Your journey to better health starts now.
Over the past few years, a lot of light has been shed on the importance of overall mental health in our youth. Especially in a post-pandemic world, we have seen a huge increase in depression and anxiety amongst adolescents. It is our job as caregivers to identify when adolescents have had stressors that are just too difficult to manage. For example, teens are going through hormonal surges, brain development, environmental stressors, as well as emotional stressors. And it is our job to identify when they cannot handle these stressors. Today, we're going to discuss the difference between normal mood disorders and abnormal mood disorders and some of the warning signs of mental health disturbances in our youth. Welcome to Ask the Doctor, a show where we encourage you to write in your questions so that I can answer them in real time. I'm Dr. Scarlet Constant, and today we're going to discuss the warning signs of depression, anxiety, or mood disorders in adolescents and young children. I'm also going to distinguish the difference between normal moodiness and abnormal moodiness. Let's start with a couple of questions. Our first question comes in now from, allhealthtv.com. So this question is from Erica. Dr. Constant, my daughter is a 7-year-old and has had a number of temper tantrums lately, which is not normally like her, and she hasn't had any play dates lately. I'm wondering if I should take her to her pediatrician or maybe a child psychologist. What do you suggest? Well, Erica, that's a very good question. And, before you go to the pediatrician or a psychologist, I think the first thing that you want to do is try to establish a timeline with the temper tantrums. If you notice that they started getting worse at a certain time, have you noticed that they're more frequent or out of character for her normal temper tantrums? And it's also important to think about what has precipitated the temper tantrums. Are there certain things that inevitably will precipitate this, or is she triggered just by any mild offense? So I think once you start looking into those things, and also you want to establish whether or not she has environmental stressors, find out what's happening at school. Are there any problems with her and her friends? Have there been any recent arguments or fights? Is anything happening in the classroom that is upsetting her? Maybe her grades are slipping, so I would speak to her teachers. And once you start to establish whether or not this is an environmental stressor or something in the home or something that has changed, and if all of those things have been ruled out, absolutely, you want to start talking to your pediatrician. And if you have a pediatrician that you actually have a relationship with and knows your family dynamic and understands what's happening in your life and your child's life, you can talk to them about it first, and maybe you could even resolve the issues there. If, of course, it's above and beyond the scope of your pediatrician, then you would absolutely want to see a psychologist. I hope that answer helps you. Let's see, we have another question in. Well, it looks like we have a question from YouTube. Anna Sophia and Ruben. My husband Ruben and I have some questions about social media and its effects on my teenage son. We think he's on it too much and it's probably not good for him. But most of our friends with teenagers just say things like all their friends are doing it, they're doing the same exact thing, and what can you do? Well, social media has, of course, been a very hot topic recently and a controversial one, just because we have seen evidence that shows that social media does have a negative effect on the overall mental health of adolescents. And this is because adolescents are still maturing, their brains are still developing, their hormones are still fluctuating, and it's very hard for them to truly interpret the information in a way that is beneficial or positive to them. There's so much light that's been shed on the effects of social media that the Surgeon General has actually recently released advisory on social media in adolescents. There are quite a few negative effects that we have seen. And I would say for your son, you need to make a decision that you and your husband are comfortable with. And if you feel that he is using his phone or is on social media more than he should, or what seems to be abnormal, then you should absolutely intervene. I don't think that anybody should use social media in an excessive amount of time. We have our actual personal interactions that are more important. You have schoolwork that's important, and reading and exercise. So of course, like anything else, this should be in moderation. Let me discuss what has been listed as some of the negative effects that social media actually has on our adolescent population. And with social media, we have found that there's a lot of cyberbullying that occurs, and cyberbullying occurs via the vehicle is social media, so via text message or platforms or videos, and it's usually used to intimidate or harass classmates or friends, and it causes a lot of embarrassment and humiliation. And I know a lot of adults have mentioned that, well, bullying has happened forever, and it's true. Everybody has experienced bullying at some point in their life, but cyberbullying is unique in that it has it leaves a mark. It stays there. You can always look back. It doesn't just disappear. It's not just one word that's thrown out in person and then just disappears. Cyberbullying sticks and has a footprint. So it is really important to acknowledge that and how impressionable that could be on a young child. Another negative effect is inappropriate content. Of course, teens and children will inadvertently run across inappropriate content. We cannot protect them from that. We could not shield them in any way, shape, or form. It happens no matter how much protection on the phone you might think you've put, they are going to run into it. And so we have to be able to deal with the repercussions when our child is exposed to something that they may have been too young to be exposed to. Number 3 is going to be withdrawal from family and friends. We've found that, for example, in your case, some kids get so addicted to social media and whichever platform they're using that they actually get addicted to their device, and they're spending way too much time watching whatever they're watching on social media rather than interacting with their friends or playing sports or just interacting at home in a normal environment. So this obviously has a negative effect on the overall mental health. Number 4 would be physical and health issues, of course. If you're sucked into social media and you're staring at your phone all the time and you're obsessed with what you see and what you perceive to be reality, and I say perceive because, again, these are young children that are still very impressionable and are perceiving things in a way that we as adults might not perceive them. And so they're constantly comparing themselves to what they see, whether it's in a positive way or a negative way, or they're trying to emulate what they're seeing. Whichever is happening, they are just misperceiving reality, let's say. So number 5 will be negative body image, of course. These kids see there are tons of filters. New filters come out every month, I think. And again, this is a perception of reality. Sometimes kids just don't understand that they're looking at somebody through a filter, and now they want to be like this person, look like this person, aspire to be like this person. And in turn, they tend to have a negative body image. Number 6, which is very important, is the social media addiction that I've discussed. And once you get addicted, this is what becomes the problem, as any addiction, is that you forget all else that's important and you are consumed with this one very thing, which is obviously quite negative. And finally, and most importantly, we don't want to forget the fact that our teens and children are very vulnerable to predators. Predators are present online. It is something that is very concerning. They target young children, and they target them for the exact same reason that I've mentioned. They're young, they're impressionable, they don't understand, they're still learning, and it's very easy to just hook them in and basically captivate them and engage in conversation or inappropriate conversations, or sometimes even worse, even getting them to meet in person, which is a very, very dangerous thing. So these are ways that social media can have negative effects. And I'm not saying to completely get rid of social media, because I understand as a parent, you don't want your child to feel left out. You don't want them to be isolated from their friends. You do want some level of engagement that is happening around. You don't want them to be the last one or the odd man out, but you do have to consider these negative effects, and you do have to talk to your child about maybe having limitations on their social media access and really having firm guidelines in your home as to how social media will be used. I hope that information was helpful to you. Let's see if we have another question coming up. All right, so we have a question from Lamar. Dr. Constant, our boy is 14 and he too spends way too much time on his laptop or cell phone. He says he's doing work for school, but I wasn't born yesterday. I know he's on social media till all hours of the night. My wife and I want to know the best way to address this and hopefully avoid all inherent drama of dealing with a teenager. Well, I have very bad news. I don't think you're going to avoid inherent drama of having a teenager. I think that's inevitable. But I do advise that if your son is actually spending too much time on his laptop or his device, that you set limitations and boundaries. And I think that that should be established before they even get their device. Oftentimes, we're so excited to get our children, devices and toys and things that they want. And then when we see that they are just totally sucked in and have no control whatsoever, then we try to pull back or punish or limit. And I think that's backwards. I think what we need to do is when we are giving a device or rewarding them with a device or a laptop, we give it with stipulations. We give it with boundaries. We have to explain the rules that we have, the expectations that we have of its use, how often you can use it, when you can use it, in which situation, so that they understand before they even break the rules what the expectations are. And there should be a time limit on any device. There should be a time where everybody turns off their device and puts it maybe in a safe room or in the kitchen, or they turn in their chargers and give it to you as parents. I do think that if they are underage, and these devices, remember, we have to remind ourselves that these devices don't belong to your children. They belong to you as parents. And if you own them, you set the rules regarding how they will be used and when they will be used. So hopefully you'll be able to get through that with your son without too much drama. So the next suggestion I want to make is actually with your social media is, aside from creating these boundaries and setting limitations, as parents, we should lead by example also. So we shouldn't be on our devices and our phones all day, and when we come home from work and at the dinner table and in our beds before we fall asleep. We should teach our children that we also have a limitation, and there are times where we need to just disconnect. Everybody needs to have a healthy time to actually disconnect and spend time together. And I think if we can do that as parents, then our children hopefully will follow suit. Okay, hi. Now we have a question from the All Health TV app, and that is from Samantha. Samantha asks, Dr. Constant, I'm a member of the board of our local PTA and a parent as well. I'm hoping that you can provide some strategies that we can share with parents to help support students' mental and emotional well-being. Well, that's a great question, Samantha, and absolutely I can help provide some strategies for that. So let's start with open communication. I think it's very important as caregivers, as parents, caregivers, providers, that we keep an open line of communication between ourselves and our children. And what this means is really encouraging our children to express themselves and talk to us. And we need to reassure them that we're listening in a non-judgmental way. We're going to listen to what they have to say. We don't have to correct it or judge it or offer advice right away. Sometimes they just want to vent and let things out, and we might not have a solution. And even if we do, they might not want to hear our solution. So I think that open communication is a great way for us to allow children to speak freely and uninhibited and know that we're just listening. And if later they need advice or would like to discuss advice or options, they can always come back to us. Another really great strategy to use is to have a healthy relationship with family or teachers or any adult in our child's life. We want to foster those. So if your child has a coach that they really like and that they connect with, and maybe they're open with their coach or they're open with their teacher or counselor, and they might not be as open with you, take that win, foster that relationship, and at least the child is speaking to someone. Number three is another great strategy. Number three is coping skills. We really want to teach our kids great coping skills. We want to help them develop these effective coping mechanisms for stress, such as deep breathing and mindfulness and problem-solving strategies. Sometimes it is innate for us as parents and providers to jump in and help solve the problem or fix the problem or explain to them the best way to solve it, when really we need to sit back and teach them how to analyze the situation and solve the problem for themselves. And, that's a way to really teach a great coping skill so that they're prepared in the future for adverse events or adverse interactions with other people. Number 4 is to promote physical health. We've always known this, right? We've always had research that's proven this, that physical health has a very positive impact on your overall mental health. So we really need to encourage our kids to exercise, play sports by doing it ourselves. We can go on family walks. You can do a run with your family, join a very small run or a walk for charity, anything that promotes just physical activity, and show them that this is the way that you can not only bond as a family, but also have a positive impact on your mental health. Joining a sport at school is a great way, and team sports is just such a wonderful way for kids not only to get physical activity, but it's great for camaraderie. It's great for having a coach or a leader or someone, a mentor that you can look up to. And it's great for, conflict resolution. You have teammates that you don't want to let down, teammates that you're interacting with, that you're friends with, or that you might even fight with, and you have to resolve that fight before your next game. So team sports is a really great way to incorporate physical activity and overall mental health. I hope that this helps, Samantha. There are a couple of other things such as realistic expectations that you want to set for your child, and of course monitoring screen time. Those are all important ways that you want to foster, good mental health at home, problem solving skills, healthy behavior, and of course, always monitoring the warning signs that we see at home. So you really want to encourage parents to look out for specific warning signs or red flags that might be occurring at home that you see, and bring them to the forefront so that you don't miss anything important. I hope that helps, Samantha. So it looks like we have a question from the audience. My baby is an 18-month-old and is biting regularly. How can I remove this habit? Well, this question is this is actually quite normal. 18-month-old is normal to bite. So in this age group, you actually explore and learn by hand to mouth, meaning taking things in your hand, grabbing them, sticking them in your mouth, and also mouthing, which is a term really for biting. So putting things in their mouth, biting, chomping. This is normal behavior. It doesn't necessarily mean that the 18-month-old is being malicious or violent. It's really just a way of them interacting, and they don't really know yet the negative effects of biting. So it's not a behavior you can really truly remove. You might want to discourage it by, if the 18-month-old bites you, saying, ow, that hurts, and moving away and kind of showing them that you have a negative response to it. That's a good way so that they understand this is something that does not feel good and that's not pleasant. But I certainly would not punish the 18-month-old. I would just constantly try to remind them that it does hurt. And then you want to distract them, give them a toy. 18 months, you're still teething. So you can give them teething toys and see if they'll want to bite that. And if they're doing it out of frustration, again, toys, firm toys, such as teething toys, are very helpful, so that if they are upset, they would just grab it and bite on it and just kind of get out some of their frustration. So you can distract and you can show them that it is negative. I hope that this helps. So I think we have another question now coming in, and it's from Javier. My wife and I have a teenage son who seems a little withdrawn lately. He and his girlfriend broke up not too long ago, and all he does now is stay in his bedroom. Should we be worried about him? Well, Javier, that's a great question. Of course, you should always be worried about your child if they seem to be a little more withdrawn than they usually are. Of course, having a breakup at this age is very hard, and it is very normal to have a response where you're sad and withdrawn and not interested in activities anymore. Again, that your son is young and his hormones are fluctuating, and they have sadness, and sometimes it seems a little more exaggerated than what we would expect, but this is normal. When you should be concerned is if you find that your son is not bouncing back and is really actually disengaging from activities that he used to participate in. If he's withdrawn and sat in his room but still goes to soccer practice, then I wouldn't be so worried. But if he starts talking about quitting activities, or he stops hanging out with his friends, he decides that he no longer wants to participate in things, then I would actually start to get really worried. And of course, if this is lasting more than 2 or 3 weeks, I would certainly be very concerned, because it's one thing to be sad and have the blues, but to become depressed and withdrawn is another thing. So I would absolutely look into this. There are a couple of things that we can discuss as warning signs for a child that is now more depressed than sad. And those things are loss of interest, of course. So like I mentioned, if they have a loss in interest in things that they used to really love to participate in, then I would be concerned. Also, if you're seeing that your child has very low energy and you've seen a physician about it and they don't have a medical cause for low energy, and they don't have an organic reason, then that is a reason to be concerned. Also, if they are sleeping too much, and if they are sleepy throughout the day, meaning it seems like they probably have not had enough sleep overnight, they might be waking up in the middle of the night, not getting back to sleep, and then they're tired all day, and then they come home from school and then they sleep from, afternoon to evening. Those are irregular sleeping patterns, and that is something to really be concerned about, and I would consider that a red flag. Also, if you find that your child is having periods of very high elevated energy and activity, and they require much less sleep than usual, and they seem like they're just always on and excited, then I would consider that a red flag. That is not normal behavior for an adolescent. Number 5 is if they're spending much more time alone and avoiding social activities with their friends or family. So, sometimes we joke and we say our kids don't want to hang out with us, they don't want to spend time with us, they're always in their room. But if they're still going and meeting up with their friends, or they're going to go outside with their best friend that they confide in, and they're still willing to go to certain activities, that's a little bit more understandable. But if they're pulling away from their family and they're pulling away from their friends, and they're just reclusing themselves in their bedroom and really not interacting with anyone, then I would definitely speak to your pediatrician or a psychologist about it. Also, you want to make sure that their diet and exercise is within normal range and it's not excessive. If you start to find that they're becoming, they're maybe calorie counting, omitting food, exercising a little more excessively than usual, worried about how much they weigh, or they're checking calories, or they're checking how much they weigh, that is very concerning. It sounds like they're starting to develop a body image dysmorphia. The next thing is, of course, most important is if they're engaging in self-harm. And by self-harm, there are things such as biting, such as cutting, burning their skin, playing with matches. And these are very superficial lesions. These are not going to be terrible injuries where you need to go to the hospital or be seen. You'll find that they're they're frequent, they're subtle, they're superficial. And so sometimes it might even take some time before you notice them. But when you do, please understand that those are cries for help. They might say, well, I scratched myself here, or this was an accident, or I didn't mean to burn myself, I was playing with a match. But if you see a pattern where it's happening consistently, again, very superficial and very subtle, but if it is happening, it is a cry for help. And finally, if they're starting to abuse alcohol, smoking, drinking, vaping, smoking cigarettes, marijuana, any vice really is a sign that your teen will possibly need help. And lastly, if they have, of course, most importantly, if they're engaging in any type of risky or destructive behavior with their friends, especially if this is new for your child. If your child has not always been this thrill-seeking, active, child, and now all of a sudden they're engaging in very risky and destructive behavior, or they're getting caught doing things that they don't typically do, then this is a warning sign. This is a sign that either your child is seeking attention, needs help, or is maybe going through a phase where they're feeling a little bit anxious or depressed. And that's a very important sign to look out for. I hope that this helps. And please, if anybody, a child that you know, a person that you know, or if you've even heard that anybody's ever said that they want to take their own life, or their life is not worth living, or they wish they were not here anymore, those are all considered suicidal ideations. Please understand that you don't have to necessarily say that I want to take my life today. If you find that a child feels that they're better off dead or not existing, that's a suicidal ideation. And if you need to get help for your teen, whether it's something as drastic as suicide or as mild as maybe just feeling really sad or feeling down or mild depression, you still need to seek help for your teen. And by those ways, you can call your pediatrician, your psychologist, you could go online. There are many resources that are available for you to get help for your teen. Well, that's all we have today for Ask the Doc. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Health Channel podcast. We hope this information has been useful. However, please remember that only your doctor can advise you about what is best for you. Do not start, modify, or suspend treatment based on anything you have heard on this podcast. Please join us again soon.